American Radio Relay League. The American Radio Relay League (ARRL) is the largest membership association of amateur radio enthusiasts in the USA. ARRL is a non-profit organization and was co-founded on April 6, 1914, by Hiram Percy Maxim and Clarence D. Tusco of Hartford, Connecticut. The ARRL represents the interests of amateur radio operators before federal regulatory bodies, provides technical advice and assistance to amateur radio enthusiasts, supports a number of educational programs, and sponsors emergency communications service throughout the country. The ARRL has approximately 161,000 members. In addition to members in the U.S., the organization claims over 7,000 members in other countries. The ARRL publishes many books and a monthly membership journal called QST. The ARRL held its centennial convention in Hartford, Connecticut in July 2014. The ARRL is the primary representative organization of amateur radio operators to the U.S. government. It performs this function by lobbying the U.S. Congress and the Federal Communications Commission. The ARRL is also the international secretariat of the International Amateur Radio Union, which performs a similar role internationally, advocating for amateur radio interests before the International Telecommunication Union and the World Administrative Radio Conferences. The organization is governed by a member-elected, volunteer board of directors. Each director serves a 3-year term and represents the members within their particular region of the country. The national headquarters facilities are located in Newington, Connecticut. Along with the administrative headquarters, the 7-acre 2.8-ha site is home to amateur radio station 1AW. The ARRL Field Organization carries out local and regional activities across the United States. Governance. The ARRL is governed by a member-elected, volunteer board of directors. The organization divides its membership into 15 divisions, each representing a separate portion of the country. 1 director and 1 vice director are elected by the members of each division to serve a 3-year term. Director elections are staggered so that 1/3 of the directors and vice directors are up for election each year. The board of directors manages policy direction for the organization as a whole. The board of directors appoints an executive committee, led by the president and consisting of members of the ARRL board of directors, to make policy decisions between full board meetings. ARRL's officers manage day-to-day administrative operation of the organization, led by the chief executive officer. These paid officers hold their positions as long as the board of directors approve but have no vote on the board. Local and regional operational activities of the American Radio Relay League are carried out through its field organization. The organization divides the 15 divisions into 71 separate geographic regions called sections. Each section has a similar team of 1 elected, volunteer section manager and several volunteer positions. Section managers are elected by the members living within the section for a 2-year term. The section manager appoints a team of volunteers. A section manager may optionally appoint 1 or more assistant section managers. An important function of the ARRL Field Organization is organizing emergency communications in the event of civil or natural disaster. The ARRL's Amateur Radio Emergency Services ARRES program is organized through the ARRL Field Organization. Each section of the field organization has an appointed section emergency coordinator. The ARRES organization supports training, establishes memorandums of understanding (MOU) with governmental and relief agencies, and organizes regular practice exercises. ARRES has provided essential supplemental emergency communications innumerable times throughout the League's history. In 1989, hundreds of amateurs responded to the Loma Prieta earthquake in the San Francisco. In 2005, over 2,000 amateur radio clubs are members of the ARRL affiliated club program. History. 1914–1920. In 1914, Hiram Percy Maxim of Hartford, Connecticut, was a prominent businessman, engineer, and inventor notably of the Maxim silencer. He was also an active radio amateur, with one of the best equipped stations in the Hartford area. One night in April, he attempted to send a message to another ham in Springfield, Massachusetts. He had a 1 kilowatt station call 1WH, and Springfield was only 30 miles 48 km away, well within his normal range. He was unable to make contact, and remembering that he knew another ham in Windsor Locks, about halfway, he asked him to relay the message. At that time, the maximum reliable range of a station was a few hundred miles, and so Maxim realized that a formally organized relay system would be of tremendous use to amateurs. Maxim was a member of the Radio Club of Hartford, and he presented a plan for the organization of an American Radio Relay League at its April 1914 meeting. The club agreed to sponsor the development of such an organization. Maxim and Clarence D. Tuska, the secretary of the Hartford Radio Club, developed application forms and sent them out to every amateur station they could think of. By September 1914, they had over 230 stations on the roster. In early 1915, disagreements began to surface as to the role of the Hartford Radio Club in the new organization, and in February the ARRL split off from the club and incorporated under Connecticut law. Finances were shaky, and most of the income came from sales of booklets, maps, and message blanks. By March 1915, there were 600 stations on the roster, and due to improvements in equipment and operating ability, some of the better stations were claiming communication ranges of up to 1,000 miles. It was apparent that the ARRL now needed some kind of bulletin to stay in touch with its members. Maxim and Tuska agreed to personally finance it, and in December 1915 the first 16-page issue of QST was sent free to all members. Further issues would be supplied through subscription at $1 per year. In 1916, with ARRL membership nearing 1,000, Maxim set up 6 trunk lines of relay stations, both east-west and north-south, and individual managers were appointed. Messages were now being relayed over longer and longer distances, and in February 1917 a message was sent from New York to Los Angeles, and an answer received in 1 hour and 20 minutes. In 1917, the ARRL was reorganized to a more formal organization. A constitution was adopted. 12 directors and 4 officers were elected, including President Maxim and Secretary Tuska, and membership was open to anyone interested in radio. No sooner had this happened than all amateurs received a letter from the Department of Commerce ordering them off the air and to dismantle all antennas because the USA had entered World War I. During the war, the ARRL facilitated the recruitment of amateurs into communications positions with the armed services, but had little else to do since all civilian experimentation with radio equipment was prohibited. In November 1918, the armistice was signed, but Congress introduced bills to put all radio operations in the United States under control of the Navy. The ARRL strongly opposed the bills, of course. Maxim testified before congressional committees, and the League organized an effective grassroots campaign with thousands of individuals contacting their congressmen in opposition. The bills were defeated, and in April 1919 amateurs were permitted to put up antennas again, but only for receiving. Meanwhile, the League needed reorganization. A financing plan consisting of selling bonds to members was adopted, and about $7,500 was raised. QST was purchased from its owner, Clarence Tuska. ARRL continued to lobby Congress for the resumption of transmitting privileges, and after a number of protests and appeals, amateur radio was fully restored in November 1919. 1920–1964, 1965 present. Presidential terms, sizzle terms. 16 radio amateurs have led the ARRL as president. Regulatory advocacy. The ARRL has opposed regulatory support for broadband over power lines, arguing that the power lines will radiate interfering radio energy, impeding amateur radio activities. The League has filed several interference reports with the FCC. The ARRL sued the FCC, claiming that the FCC violated the Administrative Procedure Act in creating its rules pertaining to BPL. On April 25, 2008, a U.S. Court of Appeals agreed with the ARRL that the FCC violated the APA, especially by redacting data from the public that could have shed doubt on the FCC decision. It is one thing for the Commission to give notice and make available for comment the studies on which it relied in formulating the rule while explaining its non-reliance on certain parts, D.C. Circuit Judge Judith Rogers wrote. It is quite another thing to provide notice and an opportunity for comment on only those parts of the studies that the Commission likes best. Services. The American Radio Relay League offers several services to members that support their on-air operations. For members with an interest in DZing, the organization operates both incoming and outgoing QSL bureaus for the exchange of QSL cards with stations in other countries. Staff at the organization headquarters maintain and operate Station 1AW, the Hiram Percy Maxim Memorial Station, as a living memorial to the father of organized amateur radio. The 1AW station is used for regular Morse code training transmissions for those wishing to learn and also broadcasts a variety of bulletins of interest to radio amateurs. The ARRL/VC Volunteer Examiner Coordinator sponsors amateur radio license examinations for the 3 classes of U.S. amateur license. License classes and examinations are held in various locations throughout the year. Although the FCC currently recognizes 14 different organizations as VEC, the VEC sponsored by the ARRL oversees about 2/3 of all U.S. amateur radio license examinations. Publications. The ARRL provides dozens of publications and journals to both members and non-members. QST is the organization's monthly membership journal, named after a Morse code Q signal that means calling all stations. The organization also publishes 2 bi-monthly magazines of special interest, QEX for radio electronics experimenters and the National Contest Journal for contesting enthusiasts. The ARRL publishes various technical books and online courses. Members of the organization also have access to a special members-only section of the ARRL website that includes technical documents, expanded product reviews of amateur radio equipment, expanded contesting information, and a searchable database of all league publications. A flagship annual publication, the Radio Amateur's Handbook, has been published since 1926. The ARRL also publishes a series of manuals designed to assist interested persons in obtaining an amateur radio license or upgrading to a higher class of license. Contests. The ARRL sponsors numerous amateur radio contests throughout the year, with the biggest of these being November Sweepstakes and the International DX Contest. Other contests and sponsored operating events include Straight Key Night, VHF Sweepstakes, UHF Contest, and 10 GHz and Up Contest. The ARRL also participates as a headquarters station for the ARRL HF World Championship. Field Day is an annual event organized by the ARRL that includes both a competitive element as well as an emphasis on emergency communications readiness and the promotion of amateur radio. Controversy. Criticisms of ARRL have included its support for less strict licensing requirements in the 2000s, which opponents consider a dumbing down of amateur radio or making it more like CB radio moves allegedly made to gain additional membership. Other critics have felt almost the opposite, however, arguing that the ARRL was slow to lobby for the removal or the easing of the Morse code proficiency requirements of the various license classes, a conservatism keeping otherwise qualified people out of amateur radio and thus threatening its future. Other critics have cited ARRL's support for segmentation of the HF amateur bands in the U.S. by bandwidth, rather than by mode, which some have claimed gives preference to users of the WinLink system and manufacturer-specific proprietary modes, such as Pactor 3, D-Star, and wide-coverage Internet Repeater Enhancement System wires. Regulation by bandwidth favors these proprietary technologies at the expense of narrowband and open standard digital modes such as JATE65. Many amateur radio operators who are seeking to develop and experiment with new technology see the ARRL as backing down too quickly on the regulation by bandwidth issue. Recent FCC rulings on the new sound card mode called ROS point to the need to drop regulations that hinder experimentation and impede the development of narrowband techniques on the bands where they are most needed. Numerous operators expressed concern that this decision profoundly undermines the principles of representational democracy and of openness and transparency. A December 2017 white paper critical of the AL's actions was published online by CQ. This censure was rescinded by the AL Board of Directors in July 2019 at the second board meeting. ARRL Maid's Cup. The ARRL Maid's Cup was created in 1928 by U.S. amateurs Fred Johnson, ARRL W6FB/W7OX, and Stanley M. Maid's 7OE/Cone CY to be awarded for the first amateur two-way communication Earth and Mars. The cup is a Philippine Igorot wood carving, a bowl supported by two standing figures. Organization. In the American Radio Relay League AL and the Radio Amateurs of Canada RAC, the section manager is an elected volunteer who implements and manages programs in the section. The section manager is elected by the members of the organization who reside in the section and holds office for a 2-year term. There are no term limits. For each of the section's activities, the section manager appoints individuals to oversee the activities. These individuals are collectively referred to as the cabinet. Cabinet positions include assistant section managers, affiliated club coordinator, bulletin manager, official observer coordinator, public information coordinator, section emergency coordinator, section traffic manager, section youth coordinator, coordinator, state government liaison, technical coordinator. The section manager also appoints volunteers to serve within these program areas. The volunteers in any given section serve at the pleasure of the section manager. The section manager also assists members with questions, issues, or problems dealing with the organization's products and services, maintains liaison with the frequency coordinating body in the jurisdiction, maintains a relationship with the local field office of the Federal Communications Commission FCCUS only, and maintains communications with members in the section via email bulletin. There are currently 71 sections in the ARRL United States and 12 sections in the RAC Canada. An affiliated club coordinator is the assistant to the section manager for radio club matters. One ACC is appointed in each section by the section manager to encourage club affiliation with the national organization on a section-wide basis. The section traffic manager is appointed by the section manager to supervise and coordinate traffic handling efforts within the national traffic system and the section. The section emergency coordinator is the assistant to the section manager for amateur radio emergency communications preparedness. The SCC is appointed by the section manager.